Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Top Kubernetes Pitfalls and How to Avoid Them webinar. I'm Thomas Keenan, Senior Product Marketing Manager with Veeam, and we're going to give it about a minute here to start. If you can reach out and check your chat window and let us know where you're dialing in from, that'd be great. Give us an opportunity to see where our audience is from today, and also give you about a minute to go grab that cup of tea or coffee and settle in for what's going to be a really, really good webinar getting into the world of Kubernetes. A lot of you are out there are curious about it or have started down the road towards Kubernetes implementation, and we'll take you through 5 of the top pitfalls and how we'd really like you to avoid them. So check back with us in about a minute. We'll get the webinar started. All right, folks, good to go. Boy, I've got folks from all over. I've got the Dallas, Texas, Purdue University, shout out to Purdue, Canada, Mystic, Connecticut, and Arizona. So we've got folks dialing in from all over, and I'm sure the gang will get even bigger as the webinar proceeds. Again, my name is Thomas Keenan. This is the Top Kubernetes Pitfalls and How to Avoid Them webinar. And again, I am, if you're just joining, I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager for Veeam. Got a bit of a housekeeping for you first today. Just orienting you a little bit. We've got a Q&A window. If you could keep Q&A to that one, we have Praveen, who's our subject matter expert, monitoring that window and ask him your questions so we can get some good answers back to you. We can also follow up post the webinar if we leave anything unanswered. As folks have been doing, please keep the chat in the chat window if you've got general commentary. Also a note, we are recording. The slides and the recording will be shared by email. Give us about a week after the webinar, somewhere like week to 10 days. And then finally, as part of the end of this webinar, we'll be looking at Story Lane, a Casting K10 demo link. And I put that the QR code on the slide if you want to take a picture of that. Alexandra, who is helping us with our back office proceedings, is also going to put it in the chat window so you have Story Lane available to you, and we can all follow along at the end of the webinar. So again, 3 easy pieces on the housekeeping. Hopefully that all makes sense. And so let me go ahead then and keep moving. All right, the agenda for today's webinar, I've got 5 sections here. Market trends to start. What's going on in the brave new world of containers and Kubernetes? Where have we come from and where are we going? Why Kubernetes adoption is not easy and the pitfalls, i.e. Kubernetes is achievable, successful deployments are achievable, but it's not easy. And let's understand the pitfalls before we get into it. And just avoid those if you would. After that, we'll talk a quick Casting K10 primer or primer, depending upon where you're from. The Story Lane demo that I mentioned. And again, Praveen is monitoring the Q&A window and he'll be glad to get you answers on topics Kubernetes, Cast-in, and likewise. All right, so let's take a quick look back at history then. It is well established now that Kubernetes is the fastest growing infrastructure software in the industry. If it hasn't become in your enterprise a leading application platform, it certainly will. And it's got kind of a long and distinguished history of improving on what came before it. As we all know, just to kind of level set here, in the pre-2000s, in the enterprise, it was all about on-premises servers running a single application and one OS. Then obviously the rise of VMware occurred in the early 2000s and the shift to virtualization, which offered increased flexibility and scalability with a hypervisor. Moving on then, first Docker and then Kubernetes itself. Kubernetes was launched July 21st, 2015 and became part of the CNCF inventory. And we really began that shift to containers, where we're adopting container technologies to enable fast and agile application development with those items called microservices. And then ever since then, the rise of Kubernetes has continued. Basically, any analyst or industry report today confirms that Kubernetes continues to pull ahead as the de facto container orchestrator. And there must be obviously some benefits to to earning that spot as a #1 enterprise application from a growth perspective, and there certainly are. #1, Kubernetes provides powerful container orchestration capabilities. It helps automating deployment, scaling, and management of containerized apps. It allows developers, in essence, to package applications and their dependencies in a consistent environment, making it easier to deploy and manage applications across different environments. #2, Kubernetes is portable and consistent. It abstracts away underlying infrastructure, providing a consistent environment across different cloud providers and on-premises data centers. This portability allows organizations to avoid vendor lock-in and easily move applications between different environments. One of the big benefits of Kubernetes is its rich ecosystem, and we'll talk about that later on in my slides when I show you the ecosystem that Veeam brings to bear in the space, in the Kubernetes space. #3, Kubernetes is designed to scale applications very easily. It can handle deployment and management of applications across clusters of machines, automatically scaling based on demand. The scalability is crucial for modern applications. If you think of enterprises building larger and larger containerized environments, pushing those to the edge, adopting hybrid cloud models, that all talks about scale. And so when you're looking for a Kubernetes solution, particularly backup and a restore solution, you definitely want to go with a vendor who's got that scale in mind. Next, Kubernetes has a vibrant and active open source community. This community-driven development ensures the platform is continuously improved. There's always the moving sidewalk of new refreshed innovations that Kubernetes brings to bear. And just to take a side note really quick, if any of you happen to be traveling, speaking of community, to Paris for KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con Europe 2024, just a quick ad here. I definitely want to make sure that you stop by our booth E11 on the main trade show floor and talk to our subject matter experts who are going to be covering Kubernetes backup and restore, disaster recovery, application mobility, and ransomware protection. They'll also have a variety of technology demonstrations to show you, and there will definitely be folks there to answer your toughest questions. So again, if you happen to be headed over there, I'd love to see you. It's a great show, many thousands of users and developers who regularly stop by to that show, both for the pre-show activities as well as the trade show floor itself. We do have 3 or 4 speaking sessions I'd like to just quickly go over. If you're attending Cloud Native Rejects before the start of KubeCon, be sure to check out the Bang When Bad Things Happen to Your Data, co-presented by Veeam's very own field CTO for Cloud Native, Michael Cade, and Anais Ulrich, who's a developer associate from Aqua Security. A couple days later, don't miss the chance to attend an informative session with Matt Slotin, who's our principal solutions architect, where he'll highlight the power of partnerships by presenting Veeam and Red Hat OpenShift virtualization in the Red Hat booth on March 20th. Couple other to mentions here. Make your way over to Pavilion level 7.3 on March 21st to listen to David Smith Uchida from our technical staff speak about the current state and future of Kubernetes, and to learn more about the Kubernetes data protection workgroup. And then finally, we'll be having, if you're curious about K8s and persistent workloads, Project Pavilion, the community pavilion, will have a kiosk for us there. We'll be there all day Wednesday from 10:45 till the end of the show that day. Blueprints for Data Services will be the presentation. And so that's just kind of a quick précis. I thought it was extremely timely, given that we've got KubeCon right around the corner. There'll be a blog covering all of this if you want to look at the Veeam blog tomorrow, posted on the 7th of March, one that I wrote. Okay, so moving past community support, Kubernetes, from an ecosystem and integration perspective, we have a very large and expanding ecosystem of tools and extensions, including monitoring solutions, networking plugins, storage options, and much, much more. Finally, a couple of other things. Kubernetes allows users to define the desired state of their applications from a declarative perspective, and also it simplifies management and ensures consistency by automatically reconciling the actual state and the desired state of the implementation. It aligns well with the principles of microservices. It enables development and deployment of applications as modular and independently deployable services, making it much easier to maintain, update, and scale individual applications. And so at the end of the day, adoption is certainly, the hallmark of any technology. How is it that, Kubernetes doing from a development adoption perspective, and who's on board? And who's on board are a lot of folks. If you look at those two reports in the bottom left-hand corner, the Forrester Total Economic Impact with IBM Services and Red Hat OpenShift, as well as the CNCF Annual Survey, which is the annual survey of that community that I have talked about. That'll be on display at KubeCon. 5.6 million developers are currently using Kubernetes. That's a 67% increase in 12 months. And these numbers are increasing all the time. That number is probably very close to 6 million and beyond. Those folks are enjoying an average of 60% reduction in IT administrative costs. Security costs also can be reduced in large way, and unplanned downtime by at least 30%. Resource consumption and licensing costs can be reduced by up to 50%, and development acceleration, i.e. getting applications out the door quickly and more effectively, 2 to 3x in general is the benefit that developers see. And that translates to between 12 and 24 weeks of labor costs that come down. And so those are the benefits that drop directly to the bottom line. And so again, lots of eyes on the space from a development point of view. Okay, so having said that, from a background perspective, hopefully a lot of that information was very useful. Net, as the title of the webinar suggests, Kubernetes, however, adoption isn't always easy. You kind of have to ask yourself at this point, and we did in the last webinar that we did of this type, where am I on the Kubernetes on-ramp? When we did a poll, and I do polls also around the KubeCon trade show floor, last time we did this poll, about 40% of folks were new to Kubernetes, about 29% had 0 to 1 year, 25% had 1 to 3 years of experience, and a few had more than that. We're not going to do that poll today, but that's been pretty consistent with the answers in the past. And so, net, what does all that mean? It means Kubernetes is a skill well worth getting. It's definitely achievable, but there are pitfalls, if you would, and that's what we're going to look at next. Just a quick shout out, however, first, if you are interested in getting more skill set in Kubernetes, we do have a very good resource for you, kubecampus.io. That's K-U-B-E, campus, C-A-M-P-U-S.io. Contains about 20 labs that cover everything from basics of Kubernetes all the way up to complex troubleshooting and other topics. So please avail yourself of that. Go out and register and take some of those labs if you have not. It also contains a wide variety of resources for you to take advantage of, such as ebooks, such as white papers, such as blogs, and others, speaking of webinars and archived webinars that have covered a wide variety of topics. We have over 25,000 registered users, and we have over 18,000 labs that have been taken. So a very, very popular resource for a lot of folks. Okay, so having said all of this, let's go ahead and pivot to the first pitfall of Kubernetes. And I guess what I call this pitfall is the legacy pitfall. I hear this a lot. It must just be like traditional virtual IT infrastructure, right? Well, it's not really. The summary here, the lift and shift isn't just a click away. This is not something that you click a couple of buttons and all is well and you're into the Kubernetes world. I'll talk in more detail about resource mismanagement and over provisioning. Certainly cloud sprawl and how hard that can be to implement, and the fact that you're fundamentally dealing with new and different concepts that you may not be familiar with. There is a skill gap still in the industry, and also there's no backup and recovery by default in Kubernetes. Kubernetes provides high availability, but that's not backup and recovery, and you need to understand you simply can't apply the traditional old virtualization backup tools to the Kubernetes world. Doesn't work that way. You want to make sure that you have a cloud native built for Kubernetes solution like Cast and K10, and we'll talk about that at the end of the presentation. So some of the challenges that can contribute to the issues I'm listing here in summary. Number one, Kubernetes configuration is and can be complex. It's often expressed in a YAML or a JSON file, and setting up these configurations correctly can take time and can be complex, quite frankly. Again, it's achievable, but we've got to learn it right. Misconfigurations obviously can lead to performance issues and security vulnerabilities, plus other unintended behavior. So we need to make sure that we get our configurations correct. Number two, resource allocation and over-provisioning. Kubernetes allows users to define resource requests and limits for containers, but misjudging these values can lead to over-provisioning or under-provisioning of resources. Overestimating resource needs may result in wasted capacity, obviously, while underestimating can lead to performance bottlenecks. Speaking of pod scheduling and schedule in general, the scheduler decides where to place pods based on resource requirements, affinity rules, and other factors. Inefficient scheduling decisions can lead to uneven distribution of workloads across nodes, causing some nodes to be overutilized while others are underutilized. So having that pod scheduling be very balanced is extremely important. Kubernetes supports next, from a scaling perspective, horizontal pod scaling to automatically adjust the number of replicas based on demand. Failure to implement or configure auto scaling properly can result in over provisioning by relying solely on manual scaling or not adjusting thresholds appropriately. So scale can be achieved. It's got to be done carefully and correctly. We're all about making sure the system is working when we have it up and running. And so inadequate monitoring and alerting can result in a failure to identify and address performance issues promptly. Without insights into resource usage, application behavior, and cluster health, it's extremely important and challenging to optimize resource allocation effectively. You need to understand tools like Grafana and Prometheus and what they can add to the mix of the tools that you've got from a resource perspective. Finally, a couple other points to make. Kubernetes networking can be complex, especially in scenarios involving multiple clusters, service meshes, and hybrid cloud deployments. Misconfigurations in networking can lead to inefficient traffic routing, affecting performance, and potentially causing over-provisioning. And then finally, inadequate security measures such as poorly configured security policies can lead to resource-intensive attacks for unauthorized resource usage. A lack of property security measures can result in over-provisioning to mitigate security risks and subject you to ransomware attacks. Okay, so let's take a look then at kind of the brave new world of cloud-native applications versus VM apps. And what I'm showing here is the classic VM-based app that you're used to, the hypervisor-based with a VM backup solution. Legacy apps in general are comprised of fewer and more monolithic components than Kubernetes is. Data consistency is often achieved through OS system level quiescing and doesn't require application level awareness. Restoring the OS will restore our application as they're bound together. So virtual machines provide strong isolation with a higher resource overhead, while Kubernetes offers lightweight containerized applications with efficient resource utilization and advanced orchestration capabilities. VMs, from an extraction point of view, create isolated instances of a full OS running on a hypervisor. Each VM includes its own OS and applications running within these VMs. From a resource utilization perspective, VMs have higher resource overhead because each VM includes a full OS. This can lead to higher resource consumption and slower startup times. Scaling. From a scaling perspective, VMs typically involve adding or removing entire VM instances. This process can be slower compared to container-based scaling, and VMs are often deployed and managed individually. Tools like virtual machine managers or cloud orchestration platforms are used for managing VM lifecycles. Finally, from a networking and a storage perspective, VMs typically have their own IP addresses and require additional networking configurations. Networking communications between VMs may involve complex setups. And from a storage perspective, VMs often rely on external storage solutions with its own storage volumes. Okay, so how does that compare then to the cloud native world? My summary points are on the right-hand side. Let me get to them in detail. Number one, from an extraction level, Kubernetes operates at the container level, abstracting applications and their dependencies into lightweight portable containers. Containers share the host OS kernel, leading to a more efficient use of resources compared to VMs. Containers are more lightweight, and multiple containers can run on a single host, sharing the same OS kernel. This results in better resource utilization, faster startup, and increased density of applications on a host. Very importantly, the next point, many interconnected microservices. Applications are often designed as microservices, where each microservice performs a specific function. This is one of the biggest benefits of Kubernetes, and can have its own unique storage needs. So polyglot persistence is highly related to this. It's a database design approach where different types of data storage, i.e. databases, are used within a single application or system. In the context of Kubernetes, polyglot persistent means leveraging various database systems to store and manage different types of data, depending upon the specific requirements of each use case or component within a distributed application. Each independent component is defined in Kubernetes by a YAML. In the context of Kubernetes, YAML files are mainly used for the configuration of K8s pods, services, and deployments. In Kubernetes, a YAML is a manifest file which performs the functions that I just mentioned. They dictate how a pod should run, interact with other objects, and more. I talked a little bit about this before. Kubernetes enables horizontal scaling by adjusting the number of container replicas based on demand. This dynamic scaling is more responsive to changing workloads. So as you scale up, scale down, if you're a company that has high watermarks for orders around Christmas or another holiday, for example, and you need the ability to auto scale the environment, it's very easy to do that within Kubernetes. And then finally, from a deployment and orchestration perspective, Kubernetes orchestrates deployment, scaling, and management of containerized applications. It allows, in summary, declarative configuration and automated deployment, making it well suited for managing microservices. So again, the whole concept of microservices and the ability of Kubernetes to implement them is an extremely important advantage of the Kubernetes world. All right, so getting now then to our pitfall number two. The belief in a lot of folks' mind is that Kubernetes is automatically secure because it's a thing called cloud. And quite frankly, for many organizations, it can be to the contrary. The summary notes that I've got here: secret and data mismanagement, running pods as root, CVEs or common vulnerabilities and exposures, namespaces and RBAC. Those are network and ingress, long-lived credentials, and assuming that data is stateless or stored off cluster. Those are all common assumptions that don't necessarily turn out to be true or can lead you down the wrong road. So let's talk a little bit about a few of these. Number one, managing secrets in Kubernetes requires careful attention to security practices and access controls. Mismanagement of secrets can lead to serious security vulnerabilities. Some common ways in which secrets can be mismanaged in Kubernetes include: number one, hard coding secrets in YAML files. Storing sensitive information directly in YAML files, such as deployment configurations, is a common mistake. If the files are exposed or inadvertently shared, the secrets become compromised. And there's a very good blog on the kubecampus.io website which covers this topic in depth. Also, insufficient access controls. Granting excessive permission to users or services within the Kubernetes cluster can lead to unauthorized access to secrets. Many organizations, when they're initially spinning up Kubernetes, they tend to grant a lot of folks a lot of super permissions, if you would, and then forget to take those down and expose themselves to additional attack vectors because of it. You've got to be very careful with over provisioning and granting excessive permissions to folks. We also want to ensure that proper RBAC, that's role-based access control, and least privilege principles, not most privilege, are crucial to prevent unauthorized users from accessing or modifying secrets. One very common mistake made is lack of encryption. Failing to encrypt secrets at rest or in transit can expose you to potential hackers. Kubernetes provides options for encrypting secrets, both at rest and in transit, but you've got to make sure that you actually implement those. The other thing that's a common problem is not rotating secrets. If you don't rotate and refresh your secrets, you increase the use of unauthorized access, like any other password that you leave the same for a large amount of time. Regularly changing passwords or credentials reduces the window of opportunity for attackers in a large way. And then also inadequate audit logging. If audit logs are not appropriately configured or monitored, malicious activities related to secret access may go unnoticed. So it's really important to regularly review and audit logs to help detect and respond to security incidents. So capturing the log is important, but you also have to go back and inspect it and make sure that nothing nefarious is occurring. Okay, so running pods as root in Kubernetes poses several additional security risks and is generally considered a bad practice due to these reasons. Number one, security vulnerabilities. Running containers as the root user increases the attack surface and exposes a containerized application to potential security vulnerabilities. If an attacker gains control over a container root, running as root, they might have more privilege to exploit vulnerabilities or escalate privileges within the container or the underlying node. Containers running as root also have the potential for privilege escalation attacks. If an attacker gains access to a container running as root, they may attempt to exploit vulnerabilities or misconfigurations to escalate their privileges within the container or compromise the host node. The next item I'm listing, those third-party package vulnerabilities, common vulnerabilities and exposures are maintained centrally and often updated. Kubernetes vulnerability scanning is a critical practice for organizations that deploy containerized applications within a K8s environment. It helps identify vulnerabilities within container images and prioritizes remediation efforts based on severity ratings. By conducting regular vulnerability scanning, organizations can enhance container security, mitigating security risks, and demonstrate compliance with industry standards. Again, if you have an industry that has a lot of regulations like healthcare, like federal, like a lot of other industries, financial, it's important to show that you maintain a clean bill of health versus those third-party vulnerabilities. Also, Kubernetes namespaces and role-based access control are essential components for multi-tenancy and access control within a Kubernetes cluster. There are certain considerations and potential vulnerabilities associated with namespaces and RBAC that need to be addressed. Namespaces provide logical isolation, but they're not a strong security boundary. An attacker with access to a namespace can potentially escalate privileges or access resources in other namespaces, especially if there are misconfigurations or vulnerabilities in the cluster. The last piece of this pitfall is assuming that Kubernetes maintains only stateless data or data that is stored off cluster. And increasingly, actually, the exact opposite is true. It was at one time true, moving to the next slide, that Kubernetes was designed with stateless workloads in mind. But Kubernetes has evolved to support stateful applications more effectively. It's now become a robust platform for running stateful applications, providing mechanisms for managing persistent storage, stable network identities, and lifecycle management, making it suitable for a wide range of applications, including databases, distributed systems, and other stateful workloads. So looking at this slide, if you look, a while back, 14% of people previously surveyed, if you would, started adopting 2+ years ago from a stateful perspective. You now see the green area. In the last 2 years, 86% of those surveyed on the Data and Kubernetes report now say that they've started adopting stateful applications. To support stateful applications, Kubernetes originally introduced the concept of stateful sets, which are controllers that manage the deployment and scaling of stateful apps with persistent identities. We next introduced persistent volumes and persistent volume claims to manage persistent storage, which represent physical storage resources in the cluster, and PVCs are requests for specific storage resources by pods. Stateful sets next enable the ordered deployment and scaling of pods. Pods in a stateful set receive unique and stable host names based on their position in the set, and this ensures predictable network identities, which is crucial for stateful applications that rely on specific node order. So at the end of the day, we've come to the place where stateful data in Kubernetes is more and more mainstream, and we should be aware that stateless at this point is kind of gone the way of the dodo in the Kubernetes space. So why would you consider data services directly on K8s? There's several reasons for that. Number one, co-location and migration. Microservices retain low latency across access to data, regardless of environment, and can be protected and restored as a single logical app if it's directly in Kubernetes. Testability and copy data management. Kubernetes lifecycle management of databases consolidates operations and enables easier cloning for development and Q&A. Next, we can reduce our chance of mismatches that can lead to unexpected data loss or corruption via the benefit of app and schema versioning. Polyglot persistence, which as I mentioned before, was a freedom that data on K8s gives you to adopt purpose-built data services on a per microservice basis versus external monoliths. So you can actually time slice down to a per microservice and adopt a data service, which is a very flexible option in Kubernetes. And then finally, you can enable things such as managed database as a service and get cost savings in the Kubernetes environment. So again, on the road to embracing full cloud native architecture, considering data services directly on K8s is absolutely something you want to be thinking about. All right, moving then on to my third pitfall in Kubernetes, and that's the assumption that because of this thing called the cloud, my data is perfectly backed up just because this cloud associated with it. Maybe, but possibly not, or probably not is the true answer. Public cloud providers operate in a shared responsibility model, so that contract that you get with the cloud provider, where the responsibility for different aspects of data security is divided between the cloud service provider and the customer themselves. The model is designed to clarify the roles and obligations of each party to ensure a secure cloud environment. While the cloud provider assumes responsibility for certain aspects, they often state specifically that customers are responsible for their own data. So that's definitely something to be aware of. Number two, public cloud services also cater to a diverse range of customers with different use cases, industries, and regulatory requirements. It would be very challenging for cloud providers to take full responsibility for data across this broad spectrum. At the end of the day, they're providing the cloud environment. You're responsible for the data that resides in it. Customer control and configuration is another reason that you should be aware of, where you have to have the responsibility in your court. Customers have control over how they configure and use cloud services. The way data is structured, encrypted, and accessed is often determined by the customer's choices. Cloud providers expect customers to configure and manage their resources securely. For regulatory compliance, it's also very important. Different industries and regions have specific data protection and compliance requirements. Cloud providers may not have visibility into specific data types or regulatory nuances for each customer. So you should know your regulations better than any cloud provider does, and therefore, cloud providers rely on customers to ensure compliance. Cloud providers typically offer infrastructure level services, but responsibility for data loss prevention falls on the customer typically. They offer tools and services to help customers protect their data, but customers need to implement and configure them based on their specific needs. And then finally, only you know your specific security policies better than anyone else does. You've got your own security policies, access controls, encryption requirements, particularly based upon the industry that you're in. Cloud providers provide the tools and features to implement these policies, but specific configurations are the responsibility of the customer. So as it is said in Latin, caveat emptor, or buyer beware, make sure you understand all of this and the requirements, and be assured that data is not generally guaranteed to be backed up just because of cloud. Please be aware also that many vendors are offering a repackaged version of open source projects, but which is, Valero, for example, but these are not in general enterprise solutions with their own regular updates, as well as very rich web and GUI resources. So definitely a Kubernetes built solution is the one that you want to be considering. Okay, the fourth pitfall that a lot of our customers come into is I can easily move workloads among clouds because of this thing called containers. That may be true, but the question is, have you really been able to try it or test it? It's possible, but some assembly in general is required to make this work. Kubernetes container applications are independent from infrastructure, which enables them to be transferred among a variety of platforms, including on-premises, public, private, and hybrid cloud infrastructures. And you do gain agility to meet customer demand, which is difficult to forecast and protect across platforms. However, the benefits from the capability are accessible when backup solutions match the portability of the applications. So make sure that any backup solution you're considering does have migration and portability in mind. It will enable things like cluster upgrade testing, i.e. managing Kubernetes changes by migrating applications in a predictable manner to an upgraded cluster, the ability to catch and address upgrade-related issues as part of a normal operating process is an imperative typically for business owners. And then also data management, that's another one of the big benefits of application mobility when implemented correctly. To analyze data and for data protection once an application or service has become production, data management tools such as App Mobility can be used to spin data to an offline copy for inspection and management. The value of creating a copy of live applications is to measure application performance, data usage, and other evaluation techniques with the most current application data set. All right, so at the end of the day, pitfall number 5 is, I guess, the general grab bag. K8s will solve all my organization's problems as a panacea. And panaceas being what they are, they're very hard to find. They do solve a lot of common issues when it comes to scaling, velocity, and automation, but let there be no question, no discussion, it also presents a lot of new challenges. So like any transformational technology, a successful implementation of K8s requires time, money, and resources. It can also blur organizational lines between developers, operations, infrastructure, and security teams. There is no quick path between step 1, adopting Kubernetes in your organization, and step 3, immediate profits. That step 2 is a very important one and involves actually a lot of sub-steps, which if you follow correctly with these steps I have mentioned in lists 1 through 5 that I've just gone through, you will have a successful or a much more successful implementation. All right, so you have to ask yourself at this point, where is your organization in deploying Kubernetes to production? And you got to ask yourself, do we have it in production today? Do we plan to have it in the next 6 months, 12 months from now? Or are we simply kicking tires and we're not really sure if we're going to implement it? And those are all fair answers. There is no one correct answer to that. What I find in general when I talk to people at the KubeCon trade show and other events is there's a mix of folks. I'm getting more and more people who have moved beyond the kicking tire stage and they're very close to Kubernetes implementation, but they have questions about the environment and the pitfalls and assuming what they need for backup and restore. And at the end of the day, no matter what stage you are in the Kubernetes on-ramp, you have to go with a vendor that provides you a solution that is going to do effective cloud-native backup, restore, disaster recovery, and application mobility. because ultimately backup is only one piece of the puzzle, and enter Kasten K10 here. You know, as a famed American novelist, Mark Twain, maybe said, backups only as good as your ability to restore them. So when you look up at a backup solution, that's basically table stakes. Data recovery, data security, and data freedom are the other important characteristics of any backup solution you're looking for. Reliable backups are just step one. They need to be restored in place for disaster recovery to occur effectively. Number two, data security is very important. Encryption, access control auditing, and ransomware protection, which is hitting more and more organizations these days, is extremely important to have in that backup and restore solution. And finally, the ability to enable data freedom, moving workloads across distributions, clouds, and infrastructure with app mobility, as I described. Looking back quickly at data security, if your organization has not been hit by a ransomware attack yet, you're probably extremely fortunate. A lot of organizations are finding that out the hard way, and it's extremely important to have a secure solution that protects against the ability to not recover your data. So being able to quickly and elegantly recover data in case of an attack is extremely important to enable. So again, it's probably not a matter of if, it's when you will be hit by a ransomware attack, and the ability to recover from that is extremely important. So let's take a quick look then at, having given kind of the high level pillars of what the solution is about. Let's look at how Kasten K10 works. Number one, discovery. It does automated discovery of your Kubernetes applications. It protects applications and data, and then it quickly and effectively allows you to restore your Kubernetes application and data anywhere. So again, to summarize, Kasten K10 is a data management platform designed specifically for Kubernetes environments. It's not an add-in, it's not a legacy solution. It was built with Kubernetes from the ground up, Kubernetes native. It provides solutions for data protection, disaster recovery, and application mobility within clusters. First, it discovers Kubernetes application and inventories all dependencies. Next, it creates a copy of your Kubernetes applications and data to ensure comprehensive protection, even as applications evolve and scale. And finally, in the case of a disaster, you can restore your entire application and data with a single click. In summary, Kasten K10 protects your Kubernetes applications and data from errors, infrastructure failures, and malicious attacks. So it also provides an intuitive UI, and we'll look at that at the end in the demo as we wind into the last 15 minutes of this webinar. And it also integrates with relational and NoSQL databases, all major Kubernetes distributions, and runs in any cloud. And I will talk about that in my ecosystem slide. So let's look very quickly at the three capabilities that I'm mentioning that Kasten K10 provides. Number one, discovery phase. Kasten K10 leverages its application-aware capabilities to automatically discover and understand the structure of applications running in the Kubernetes environment. It identifies pods, namespaces, and the data associated with each workload. It also collects metadata about the applications, including their dependencies, configurations, and relationships. This metadata is crucial for maintaining an accurate catalog of the entire application landscape. And then finally, users define policies based upon the discovered information, a very important part of the Kasten K10 solution. When you define these policies, they outline the backup and data management requirements for each application, specifying parameters such as backup frequency, retention policies, and target storage locations. So again, in discovery, we capture your entire application stack. We discover it automatically. We include resource definitions, and then we also understand what's going on from a relational and a NoSQL database perspective and all your Kubernetes distributions. So we discover the entire application stack, and then we act on it. And by acting, I mean we then go ahead and we protect it. Kasten K10, instead of managing individual volumes of containers, it focuses on protecting entire applications, ensuring consistency and integrity across all components. Utilizing the policies that we defined that we talked about, Kasten K10 automatically schedules and performs backups of Kubernetes applications. It captures the entire application stack, including configuration data and dependencies, ensuring the backup is consistent and recoverable. Kasten K10 also leverages Kubernetes native snapshot capabilities when available, providing efficient point-in-time copies of persistent data. Snapshots contribute to rapid and space-efficient backup and recovery processes. It also supports multi-cloud and multi-region backup. It offers flexibility in choosing backup targets, supporting multi-cloud, multi-region backup strategies. This enables organizations to implement DR and data mobility across different cloud providers or regions. So for the enterprise who has a variety of locations throughout the globe, for a regional in the US or in another country with multiple locations, for an organization that, such as a retail organization, for example, that has many edge locations, these are all great applications of multi-cloud and multi-region support. And also people spreading bets between cloud providers occurs often, and we certainly support that as well. All right, finally, restore anywhere, the final piece of the equation. We do coordinated application recovery. Kasten K10 allows for granular recovery at different levels, such as application, namespace, or individual volume. This flexibility ensures that users can restore only the necessary components without affecting the entire application. Users can perform point-in-time recovery, rolling back applications to a specific state captured by a backup. This is essential for recovering from data corruption, accidental deletions, or other issues that require rollback to a known good state. Kasten K10 supports cross-cluster and cross-cloud restoration, allowing users to recover applications and data across different Kubernetes clusters or cloud environments. This capability enhances disaster recovery and enables seamless data mobility. And then finally, Kasten K10 includes features for validating and testing backups. Users can ensure the integrity of their backups by testing the recovery process in a non-production environment. This is a comprehensive approach to data management in Kubernetes. And in summary, we emphasize discovery, protection, and restoration of applications and their associated data. So quick segue onto why data consistency is important. To understand the purpose of blueprint bindings and what blueprints provide, we must first understand why blueprints matter. So when performing a backup with Kasten, data can be captured in a number of different ways. Using supported storage, Kasten performs crash-consistent snapshots of Kubernetes persistent volumes. But this is likely insufficient for workloads such as databases, where data consistency is critical to ensure a reliable restore experience. Blueprints can be used to perform completely logical backups or to integrate with built-in data protection capabilities of certain Kubernetes operators. Blueprints can also create significant competitive advantage and opportunities, not only based upon the functions they perform, but also the ability to maintain a single templatized version of a blueprint, which can be shared by multiple applications leveraging similar data services. So where exactly do blueprint bindings fit in? Blueprints are the capability through which Kasten produces data consistent backups. And why do we care about data consistency? We care about data consistency. Sorry about that, too far. We care about data consistency because data services are a key component, as we know, of the ecosystem infrastructure. And this is where I'm showing the Kubernetes data protection platform and the ecosystem it involves. So Kasten K10 integrates with all Kubernetes technologies that we use: data services, Kubernetes distributions, storage infrastructure, and security services. And on the left-hand side, I'm showing data services. And the blueprints, that is where data consistent backup comes in. So whether you use Amazon RDS, Cassandra, PostgreSQL, SQL Server, Elasticsearch, data consistency is incredibly important. We also support all major Kubernetes distributions, storage infrastructure from all the major vendors, and all the major securities services in the industry, which each release of Kasten K10, which we do about twice a year, right around KubeCon timeframe, we add to the richness of our ecosystem in each one of these environments. So stay tuned for future enhancements in our ecosystem. Check back often. We have a lot of partners we're working with, and as I mentioned, we'll have a lot of partner work that we do in KubeCon coming up. Check out the blog that I've written that we posted on the Veeam blog tomorrow. It's called Destination Cloud Native. Join Veeam at KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con Europe 2024. And you can go ahead and avail yourself of that on the Veeam blog. All right, so all of this discussion on K10 hopefully has made you want to get your hands on the product. And in the window here, I am showing both a QBR code, if you want to take a snapshot of that right now, as well as URL kasten.io/free Kubernetes to get free up to 5 nodes fully featured in perpetuity. There is no fuse on it. It's not going to run out. Go ahead, jump in any area of the swimming pool, the deep or the shallow end that you desire, and get yourself associated with Kasten K10 and all the capabilities that it provides. So again, a great thing to go out and grab, Kasten K10, and start on your journey or continue on your journey depending upon where you are on the moving sidewalk of Kubernetes. And so at this point, rapidly approaching the end of the webinar, I'd like to drop into a very brief Kasten K10 demo. And as I mentioned, Alexandra has put the URL in the window. And if you want to take a quick snapshot of this screen, I also have provided the QR code. So let me drop out of this very quickly and bring up what I call Story Lane. And Story Lane is an interactive demo that allows you to have a quick tour of Kasten K10. It gives you an introduction, talks about application awareness, understanding backup policies, and advanced features. So this URL provides a lot of richness of the Kasten K10 solution and allows you to drive around, and is a nice adjunct to getting Kasten K10 itself. So consider this kind of the, if you would, the training wheels, maybe before you get to that Kasten K10 download to familiarize yourself with the platform. And I'll just go through a few of the functions. Again, you'll get the welcome to Kasten by Veeam. In the short interactive demo, we're going to have a look at Kasten K10. It's an easy to use, scalable, and secure system as we've talked about. It is just a demo environment. You won't be able to actually perform any actual backup or restore operations. Again, that's when you download Kasten K10 itself at that previous URL I gave you. We'll cover here how you can get your hands dirty, so let's get started. The first thing it's going to bring up is the web dashboard. Again, the dashboard gives us a general view of the Kasten K10 solution. It performs all of backup, restore, disaster recovery, and mobility operations, and covers in summary what they provide as they're deployed on a Kubernetes cluster. If you go to the next area, if you just click on next, it pretty much drives itself. Because Kasten K10 is deployed within the Kubernetes cluster, it automatically discovers applications, their components, and data, as I said. So let's take a look at the applications page a little bit later. Continuing the introduction, it involves looking initially at policies. Protecting an application and its data within Kasten K10 is accomplished through policies, as I mentioned. We can define policies and policy presets to save time and effort protecting our applications by defining a single policy and applying it to multiple applications. This enables us to easily align to our business's RTO and RPO requirements. So whether you have a time-based or a point-based recovery policy, it can adopt to both. This Kasten K10 also gives a quick summary of our total data usage on the dashboard, both in the K8s cluster storage and off storage clusters such as S3 compatible object stores. So you'll get a nice reading on the data usage, if you would, from a couple of perspectives. And again, a nice summary at the high level, at the dashboard level of these capabilities. As policies that you create are executed, jobs will appear here on the dashboard, and we can quickly discern their duration and whether they're in progress, if they've succeeded, or if they've failed. And then finally, the last piece of the dashboard that we'll cover, we can also see summary stats across our jobs to give us a sense of the health of Kasten K10 and the overall protection of our applications on our cluster. So that's a quick drive around the dashboard. The applications summary gets into pretty deep detail here, and this is the last one I'll cover. After that, profiles and blueprints are part of the demo. Definitely avail yourself offline of the story lane tool, and you can drive through those yourself before you download Kasten K10 itself and get your feet wet. But within the applications page, let's quickly take a look at it. There's 5 sections to this page. We can see discovered applications organized by Kubernetes namespace and each application's current policy status. As new applications are deployed on our cluster, Kasten K10 automatically discovers and enumerates them here. And if you'll notice, I have one compliant application, that's Pacman, that's deployed currently. The rest of them are unmanaged. For each discovered application, we can see a summary of the discovered application components. For Pacman, for example, the icons indicate it's got 8 gig of total allocated disk space, 1 persistent volume, 2 workloads, 3 services, and 5 configuration components. We can see our application is compliant with our backup policies and its date, of last backup. So we can quickly and easily perform backup and recovery applications on our application. Operations on our application. All right, so that's our quick drive around, our quick demo of the story lane solution and tool. Go ahead and, like I said, this is a very brief introduction. I would highly advise doing that first and then downloading Kasten K10 second for your 5 free in perpetuity. Go ahead and get them, and obviously give us feedback and contact us if you have any questions. Alrighty then, so at this point, do have a couple questions. I know we're almost at the top of the hour, but I'd just like to go over a few questions that have appeared. I know Praveen has been in the Q&A window assiduously answering questions. But one question that often does come up is there ability to protect kind of a tiny cluster, like an edge solution, if you would, using Kasten K10 kind of in an efficient way? And as a matter of fact, yes, there is. You can deploy Kasten K10 without a Grafana, which instrumentation, which can take up a lot of resources. Just go ahead and in docs.kasten.io, go and disable Grafana deployment via a Helm chart. You should be able to disable it. It is described in docs.kasten.io how to go ahead and do that. Just do a search on Grafana deployment, that should pop right up. And yeah, that can definitely support a tiny cluster and edge application if you would. All right, second question that comes up a lot is from a resource usage perspective, is there a way to dedupe in order to avoid storage consumption? Great question. As a matter of fact, there absolutely is in Kasten K10. You can actually not turn off encryption and dedupe. It automatically is done as we pull data off the cluster. And that can certainly save a lot of cloud costs if you're using environments such as S3 or Wasabi and other cloud services. So absolutely the capability exists to do that. And then finally, from an industry perspective, we get this a lot. What are you seeing regarding things like the implementation of OpenShift and Rancher for enterprises versus just vanilla Docker, if you would? And we're definitely seeing a trend to those more enterprise-rich solutions and away from, if you would, more and more from the vanilla Docker solution, particularly from any environment, any enterprise environment that really needs enterprise-level features as well as a real GUI and a real managed service, if you would. And so with that, I am at the top of the hour. Again, I do appreciate the time here. Again, hit us up on our LinkedIn, on all our tools. Hit us directly with any questions on our Veeam website, and we'll be very happy to greet you again If we don't see you at KubeCon, then certainly at the next webinar that we'll be having in the not too distant future involving Kubernetes. Thanks again for your time and attendance, and have a great day wherever you are. Cheers.